of the pundits or any of the experts realize today. And I've seen it myself. I'm on the board of a venture capital firm, the biggest green tech firm in the country, and they're doing things. Right now, one of our companies is rewiring Israel. Israel has made a commitment to be off of gasoline and off of oil within 3 years. All the cars will be electric within 3 years. And that's how fast they did it. And the same company, which is called Better Place, there's a story about it in the New York Times, Tom Friedman has a column about it today, has signed a contract with Denmark. After they finish with Sweden, they're going to do Denmark. After they do Denmark, they're going to go to the United Kingdom and do all of the islands of the United Kingdom. And they've got 30 other countries that are now negotiating with them. So this is going to happen faster than anybody believes. We should be leading the way in this country. But we need leadership at every level, from our entrepreneurs, from our business people, from our communities, but we also need leadership that starts at the top. Because right now, the problem is we have far more abundant geothermal than they have in Iceland. We have enough solar energy. We have the second best solar energy of any nation in the world. And we have enough energy. Scientific American just reported enough solar energy in just 19% of the most barren desert land in Arizona to provide energy for electrical energy for the entire United States, even if every American owned an electric car. The Midwest is the Saudi Arabia of wind. We have enough harnessable wind resources in Montana, North Dakota, and Texas, just in those 3 states, to power all the energy in our country, even if every American owned an electric car. The problem is we have an antiquated grid that doesn't reach those areas, so that if you're a Texas wind farm owner, you can't sell your electrons to New York City, because using the antiquated grid, the electrons will dissipate and they'll never be able to cross the Mississippi River. We need government help to rebuild our infrastructure so we can transport that energy from the wind zones, from the solar zones in this country to the big markets. Number 2, we need to get rid of, each state has its own set of rules. All 50 states have their own set of rules for getting access to the grid. We need to get rid of that. So the lowest cost producer can get on that grid. If you put solar panels on your house, and there's a time of day when you're generating more energy than you're using, you ought to be able to sell that energy back to the grid, like they can here in Kentucky, but you ought to be able to get market rates, which they can't here in Kentucky. You ought to be able to be rewarded for your innovation and for your investment in the marketplace. We need to turn every American into an energy entrepreneur, every home into a power plant. And when we do that, I talked about the $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year we're giving in subsidies to the oil industry, and that does not include the $3 trillion that we're going to spend on the Iraq war, which should also be billed to their account, because that's the part of the price, right? And this addiction that we have to oil is killing our country. It's destroying our values. If we get rid of it, we dramatically improve our balance of payments. We eliminate our national debt. We improve the giant trade deficits dramatically again. We preserve ourselves from entanglements with these Mideastern sheiks who despise democracy, who are hated by their own people, and who we should have nothing to do with. We preserve ourselves from these wars in the Mideast that are destroying our economy, destroying our national prestige, destroying the moral authority of our country. And we make every American richer. If you're driving an electric car and you're saving, I was driving a minivan that I was paying $3,000 a year for gasoline. Now I'm driving a Prius. I spent about $1,100. That means I have over $1,000 in my pocket at the end of every year just from energy savings. You remember, what if every American had that? And more. You remember when President Bush sent us a $300 tax check? And he said, this is a national economic stimulus package. And well, imagine if all of us were getting a $1,000, $300, $200 check just from not spending it on oil every year, not sending it abroad. What would that do to permanently stimulate our economy? Not just once, but year after year after year. And we wouldn't have to cut the Social Security Trust Fund to do it. And we have now an administration that instead of going in that direction, which is the most important thing for our national security as well, we're going in the opposite direction. The only solution they can come up to with our energy process is to give $100,000 tax breaks to people who want to buy Hummers. Okay, get rid of the tax break for hybrid cars, which is what this administration did, and then we go drill in the Arctic and offshore. As if we can drill our way out of this problem. It's like, President Bush in every one of his State of the Union addresses has called this a deadly addiction. Well, you don't get rid of an addiction by giving the crack addict more crack. We need to get rid of the addiction by getting off the stuff. So, we have an administration that's going the other way. If you look at, and this is the worst environmental administration that we've had in American history. If you go to NRDC's website, you'll see listed there over 400 major environmental rollbacks that have been promoted or implemented by this White House over the past 7 years as part of a deliberate, concerted effort to eviscerate 30 years of environmental law. It's a stealth attack. The White House has used all kinds of ingenious machinations to conceal this radical agenda from the American people, including Orwellian rhetoric. When they wanted to destroy the forest, they called it the Healthy Forest Act. When they wanted to destroy the air, they called it the Clear Skies Bill. But most insidiously, they have put polluters in charge of virtually all the agencies of government that are supposed to be protecting us from pollution. The head of the Forest Service is a timber industry lobbyist. Mark Ray, probably the most rapacious in our history. The head of public lands, until recently, was a mining industry lobbyist, Stephen J. Griles, who now he's in jail, serving 10 months for doing sweetheart deals with polluters. And he's the one who's destroyed these mountains. Mountaintop mining was his idea. He thought it was a great idea. And he still does while he's sitting in the penitentiary. But Griles has said for many years that he believes that public lands are unconstitutional. And this is the man who's been put in charge of running our public lands. The head of the air division at EPA, a utility lobbyist, Jeffrey Homestead, probably who's represented nothing but the worst utilities, most polluting utilities in our country. The head of Superfund, a woman whose last job was teaching corporate polluters how to evade Superfund. That is second in command of EPA, a Monsanto lobbyist. The New York Times recently did a report on a series on the president's #1 environmental advisor, Philip Cooney, who is the head of the Council on Environmental Quality. His office is in the White House, next to the Oval Office, and his job purportedly is to advise the president on the environmental impacts of every decision he makes. Philip Cooney's last job was as chief lobbyist for the American Petroleum Institute. And as it turns out, his principal preoccupation over the past 7 years has been combing through every federal scientific document issued by all the different agencies of government and redacting or suppressing or altering or deleting inculpatory or damaging statements about the oil industry or the coal industry. So he suppressed 12 major studies on global warming that you and I paid for, the federal taxpayer, that never saw the light of day. And so his job essentially has been to deceive the American public. And, there's nothing wrong with having business people in government. It's a good thing if your objective is to recruit competence and expertise. But in all of these situations, these individuals have entered government service not to serve the public interest, or rather to subvert the very laws that they're now charged with enforcing in order to enrich the president's corporate paymasters. And they have imposed tremendous diminution in quality of life in the people of this country. And most Americans don't know about it. They don't make the connections because we have a negligent and indolent press in this country that has simply let down the American public and American democracy. But I'm going to give you an example because I'm standing in a state that's been one of the chief victims of just one industry. And in my book, in Crimes Against Nature, I talk about all these different industries that have a chokehold on this administration of corporate hog farms and corporate agribusiness, and that have been able to engineer these in the chemical industry, the nuke industry, that have been able to engineer these rollbacks that have been so damaging to public health and to quality of life of people in this country. But I'm just going to talk about one industry today because it disproportionately impacts the people of this state.